All right, so in the previous sections, we've seen how we can select variables of interest, and we've seen how we can filter for certain observations of interest. Lots of times we want to combine these two, and there's a couple different ways we can do it. And honestly, the way that you decide to do it, it's kind of a preference, personal taste, whatever you like to do. I'll express some of my opinions in it, but by all means, either one of these options are perfectly fine to use. So let's go ahead and take a look. We're going to use this plains DF data again that we have been using. And so now, let's say we actually want to we want to select the variables year and engine, and we want to get the rows where manufacturer equals Embraer. Okay, so how do we go about doing this? Well, option one, as you saw in the reading, is what we call the sequential. So this is where we can actually go ahead and do step one and then do step two. Okay, so the way to do this is we can go ahead, and the first thing we would want to do is actually subset the rows, right? So we could say plains DF. We're looking at manufacturer equals Embraer. And you recall we get a series in return that has our true and false, and we can use this to go ahead and get those rows of interest. So I'm going to say subsetted rows equals that. So I can go ahead and look at subsetted rows. And now we see we're going to get all those where manufacturer equals Embraer. Okay. Now the next step is to go ahead and take this, and from here we want to actually select the columns of interest, right? So what I could do is go ahead and I could say from this subsetted rows, I want to get the year and the engine column, and to do that we need to pass a list, and I'm going to go ahead and say year, and it's engines. You can see I would get those two. So now I could say, go ahead and get subsetted columns. And we get our result. Now the thing is, as you do this, it gets a little bit cluttered. And so the way I prefer to do it is often with this simultaneous operation. Now, a good part of doing this sequential one is you can kind of go along the process and validate your output is expected. So you could do this first step, and then you can go ahead and validate that yes, I am getting the rows of interest that I was looking for, and I could do the second step and say yes, I am getting those columns of interest, and so on. But we can also combine this, right? And so when I combine, things start to get a little bit cluttered up because of how long the syntax becomes. So typically what I do is I go ahead and create a rows and a columns of interest, okay? So for my rows, what I'm looking for, recall, is that plains DF, and it's manufacturer equals Embraer. And then the columns of interest is going to be just a list that has the two columns, which I'm looking for, year and engines. So I've created kind of my two objects that specifies what rows I care about, what columns I care about. Now what I can do is I can use plains df the .loc accessor, and what I can say is I want to get the rows and then comma the columns. Right, so I can pass both rows of interest and columns of interest in .loc, and what I get in return is going to be the same thing we saw earlier, where we have our year and engines, and these would be the year and engines for the manufacturer equals Embraer. All right, so let's go ahead and use this knowledge, and it says subset planes. Here's the knowledge check. Subset the planes DF to only include planes made by Boeing and the seats and model variables. Okay, so let's first go ahead and take a look at planes DF here. What we're saying is we want to find where manufacturer equals Boeing, such as this row. And we also want to select the seats and where's the model? In the model. So these two columns. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and say planes DF, and I care about where manufacturer equals Boeing, all caps. And I could always go ahead and let's validate that I am getting some truths in here, and I do. Okay, I actually have quite a bit of those aircraft or observations that are made by Boeing. Okay, so I've got my rows of interest. So I'm going to go ahead and say rows equal this. My columns is going to equal the seats variable and the model variable. And then now I can go ahead and do planes DF, use the .loc accessor, specify my rows, columns, and now I get 1,630 rows. That's what we saw when I did, I summed up how many true we had in here. We have our two columns, seats and model.